Okay, we are now recording, so I can post this to the class website later. Just for full disclosure, the recordings are in YouTube, but access to them is by people who have the link only. So no one will see the class or the pictures or hear things unless they have the particular link. That is not what I would call secure. If we have class time for me to talk about some internet security things that I think are important, we'll talk about that. That falls under the category security by obscurity. Background talk, is that for me or is that just something that's unavoidable? No worries if it is. Okay, so on to today, and hopefully the slides are pulling up better for you than they are for me. There we go. I am going to switch to what am I going to switch to? Something that apparently isn't open anymore. So I'm going to switch to Keynote. And if I tell it to play, do you see the slide full screen?
Yes.
Okay. It is annoyingly full screen for me, but I'm just going to have to deal with that. Okay. So today I want to talk about PageRank, which is an aspect of SEO that I haven't touched on yet, and it is important. But before I talk about PageRank, I want to put it in the context of other, excuse me, I'm going to move the camera. Put it in the context of other SEO features and explain why it is where it is. So we've talked about web pages presented a very particular challenge to the way that we organize things. Before we had a global network, sorry, there was a comment that the slide on the screen is keyword analysis. Is that still the case, or do we see the PageRank and details slide? It is still the case that you're seeing keyword analysis. Oh dear. So what about now? Okay, I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to share my screen again. And this is the page that I would like you to see. Hopefully you see it now. Does it say PageRank and details?
It do.
Okay. And it didn't show this before, it showed something else? All right. So apparently, either it's not possible or I haven't figured out a way to do it to show the slide when I hit presentation like this. Do you now just see the slide and not the background of Keynote? You do, okay. So, hang on, sharing is paused. Bring your shared window to the front. Okay, that's annoying. Let me try one more thing. All right, I believe this is the effect that I want to get. You just see a slide, right? Okay, so web pages, or the fact that we had a global network where people, without the mediation of printers or publishing companies, could make content available to other people, it was a challenge for the way we organize things, because the way that we organized things before is we submitted items to be organized, someone filtered them or looked at them and decided what's worth saving, what's not, and then put it into categories, and people could come by and look for those categories to find things. And a good example of that is the Library of Congress subject headings, which are used to organize the content in basically all the books that are published in English. So for example, and here I'm curious, I'm going to clear the comments for just a second. All right, I don't have control of my mouse. Anyway, give me a green yes if you've had some sort of coronavirus connected research assignment as instructors try to make things relevant or timely. Bunch of red no's. Okay, some yes. Anyway, we talked before about controlled vocabulary and taxonomies. For the coronavirus, or coronaviruses in general, right, because SARS and MERS are also infections of different coronaviruses, there are two headings, one called coronavirus for the virus itself, and then if you want to search for the disease that's caused by the particular form of coronavirus that we have this year, the COVID-19 or the coronavirus disease 2019, that's under coronavirus infection. So if you're looking for that in an old school system, that's what you'll find. Hang on just a moment. Okay. So with the rise of web pages, too much happened too quickly. We overloaded the filters. And I'm sure you've seen this in cases where people couldn't moderate a forum because too many people were commenting and they just got overwhelmed. So we had to come up with something else. And people tried a bunch of different things. We tried putting stuff in categories. We tried crowdsourcing, putting things in categories. We tried keyword search. And not a lot of that worked until Google made its changes on keyword search. And the things that we've been working with so far, treating HTML tags as if they're metadata, treating the title tag, the heading tags, the anchor linked tag on inbound links from other pages, or other things, treating those as if they were descriptive metadata was a big help. But there was one more thing that Google did that helped its brand of search become ubiquitous. And I mentioned some of these. Instead of organizing or cataloging the web, Google just watched. Some would say spies on, others would say watched how people use the web. And excuse me while I reconfigure my screen. I hope this isn't giving anyone vertigo. All right. Oh, you probably don't see my zoom element. So the way things are ordered on the screen makes sense to me, not to you. Okay, sorry. I'm going to pause for a moment and I'm going to reshare. This time I'm going to do the class web page. So instead of organizing or cataloging the web, Google just spies on how people use it. If a lot of people search for a term and then go to one particular website, they know that that website correlates with that term and they'll send more people that way. Yes, I appreciate the clearing of the comments. That's perfect. Thank you. Okay. So Google watches what people do. And one way that they do that ends up being really helpful is explained by this silly seeming little picture. Tell me, have I shown this to you in class before? Have you seen this particular diagram? Okay.
I think like really early.
Okay. What happened is when Larry Page, PageRank is sort of a play on his name. Larry Page, one of the Google founders, invented it, and it ranks pages. So PageRank, Larry Page, rank pages, haha. PageRank is copying the way that university faculty and researchers play a game of who's most important. Because while it may seem like our profession and our jobs are nobly motivated by people who want to increase the world's knowledge, which in large part that is true, which ones of us are most important is hugely important in terms of getting jobs, getting paid, getting grants, professional recognition and promotion. And the way it works is when we write up our research for faculty, you can assume roughly, and this probably isn't accurate for any one person, but it's a good way of looking at everyone, half our time is spent teaching and half our time is spent doing research and publishing the results of our research, which is why the essay is such a standard form of student output. It's the form that all your instructors output their stuff. So it's the way things are done in this way. Anyway, as we're writing, anytime we use somebody else's research, we have to cite them. You've all done this, the citing of sources, the coming up with the bibliography. You've probably wondered, why am I being asked to do such a trivial and detailed thing? It's so annoying. I've written the paper. Now I have to spend another 5 hours formatting the citations. That's a fairly common sentiment. Well, it makes sense. What those are ways of finding the work that you used to to come up with your own conclusions, and we count that. At the end of each year, when we turn in our annual reviews, we turn in a count of how many people have cited our work in the last year and how many people have cited our work overall. It's the way that we tell which one of us is most important. Well, Brin and Page were grad students and they thought, that's an interesting way of doing things. What if we treated links like they were someone citing their source? And every time someone, Dylan says, who's most important at WSU? I will look that up later. I know who it was a few years ago. For a long time, it's been someone in neuroscience who's done a lot of work with rat brains. I think I had a friend from college who did this for a while. We sort of teased him about his job was just to, get a bunch of rats stoned. But apparently, the neuroscience or the effects of that on the brain are very useful to making people's lives better. But anyway, and just to be clear, another factor of that, it's not just the total number of votes, it's some votes, citations in the most important journals count more than citations in less important journals. So it's a competition to get published in an important journal and then to get people to cite that and to move on. There's a lot of different ways of measuring it. With web pages, they decided, what if we treat someone from the outside writing a link to a page as a citation or a vote? And the more important the page that's providing that link or citation, the more that vote is worth. And that's how we got PageRank. So if we look at the picture of the happy little circles, each of the happy little circles is a web page. And the size of each circle is the PageRank, which is a number. Basically, PageRank is an algorithm, in which there is a total sum of one page rank for the entire web or the entire system that's being measured. And the size of each circle is how much of that page rank is allotted to that particular page. And here's what we can learn from looking at the happy circles. And I am going to turn on, where are we? Oh, I can't see it because it's behind Zoom. All right, I'm going to turn on the cursor highlight. So, and what happens if I embiggen that? It doesn't do anything because it's a pop-out. Okay. Okay, so page rank, we have these circles. The big ones have more page rank than the little ones. Each finger pointing is a link. And so from that, we can determine some things about the relationship. These little green circles, the ones with the smallest smile and the smallest circumference, because they have the least page rank, these are individual pages with no inbound links coming to them. So if we look at this, even though we have 5 pages or 6 pages that are linking to this blue circle, the blue circle, relatively speaking, isn't very big. The yellow circle has the most links coming into it, and so it's bigger than the rest. But this red circle only has 1 inbound link, and yet it's bigger than some others that have multiple inbound links. Like, it's bigger than this green one, which also has 1 inbound link, but it also only has 1 inbound link. And the reason is the size of things. And you'll notice that on this green one, this page rank can be inherited, right? This page links to this page, so it has more page rank than some of these others. And yet, when it gives a link to another one, that one has more page rank than the tiniest ones, because that page rank, it's transitive. It can be passed on. And so more links are good. Important links are better. This relationship between the yellow one and the red one, you've all seen small sites that do something that makes it to the front page of Reddit, or is mentioned by the New York Times, or is mentioned on Slashdot, which is a programmer site that works a lot like Reddit. It's a little older. When something goes viral in a website way, what happens is it gets a lot of page rank, it shoots to the top of the search rankings, and then their web server sometimes has trouble handling all the traffic that comes its way. So this is a big part, less so than it used to be, but still a big part of the difference between showing up on Google SERP on the first page or the third page. There is all of the technical on-page optimization, and we've talked a lot about that because that's the kind of search engine optimization that you can do something about. As far as PageRank goes, one of the things that makes it useful to Google is it's much harder to manipulate things like PageRank that measure distributed effects throughout the web as opposed to things on one page. It's much harder to spoof PageRank than it is to spoof technical on-page SEO. It doesn't mean it's impossible. Give me a yes in the interaction if you've ever seen a spam comment on a WordPress site, or you've done something, or you've made a comment, or you've made a post. Sorry, I have a question. Because the large red site and the large yellow site are linked to each other, does that mean they will likely grow together? Yes, although the effect of this red site on this yellow site is much less than the effect on this yellow site than this red site. Like with a lot of things, if you're a freelancer and you have a lot of different clients, having one cancel on you is going to have a small but not crippling effect on your income. If you have a job full-time and they lay you off, that's going to have a much bigger effect. And I'm sorry for the grim example. I should come up with something less timely. So they grow together at different rates. The red one is going to have a harder time affecting the yellow one. We, as an individual person, are going to have a harder time affecting the front page of Reddit than the front page of Reddit is going to have affecting our site. In the same sort of way that, to pick an arbitrary famous person, what Hailey Bieber says about me in public is going to have a bigger effect on my reputation than what I say about Hailey Bieber in public. Did I channel Rabbi correctly there? Okay. More questions on that? Okay. So that's PageRank. Links matter. And the way we link to things are votes. So this is a nice sum up about SEO. You should probably look at this before the time comes when we look at the final exam. But HTML tags act as impromptu metadata. They were never intended to be metadata, except, ironically, the meta keywords tag, which isn't used for this. And that, I'm going to throw in a tangent here. To say something ironically means that your intended meaning is the opposite of the dictionary meaning, which is what Alanis Morissette, who's awesome, got wrong in her classic 90s song. But in this case, the HTML tags is metadata and the meta keywords tag is perfect irony. Meta keywords was intended to be metadata because there wasn't any other metadata. And it turns out that everything but meta keywords is used as metadata. Another thing to keep in mind as we look at SEO, links to other pages are votes. Much of that is out of our control, but this is why people form things that are technically called reciprocal link arrangements, which is a fancy way of saying I'll link to you if you link to me. So if you're part of some sort of group, if you're doing a church or a synagogue or a mosque website, and your group belongs to an ecumenical council of religious groups in your area, you can say, let's all link to each other so our collective SEO is improved. That's the sort of thing that you can do. As alumni, future alumni of the DTC program, you ought to think about keeping touch with your colleagues so that in the future, when you have web pages, you can have an agreement to, we'll provide sidebar links to your pages if you provide sidebar links to our pages, and collectively we'll share and grow our Google juice. Okay. Traffic is also reputation. The more links that you have, the more important your vote is. And this is where I make a sarcastic, which is similar to, but not exactly ironic joke. It's kind of like money and voting in America. The more money you have, the more your vote counts. But as a general rule, sarcastic jokes are not approved of in this situation where I have more power than you. And certainly cynical jokes about politics tend to have a dampening effect on the vote. And we should, whatever we're going to vote for, get out and vote. Okay. Next, anchor link text. is descriptive metadata. And this is a very important thing that I haven't gotten around to before now. Its importance is not related to how often I've talked about it up until now. When you write a link to another page, not only is that a vote, but the anchor link text. And as an example of anchor link text, I'm going to highlight, if my cursor will highlight, this A tag. A actually in HTML language stands for anchor. I never think of that when I'm doing it. It's just A is how you write a link. But this is how you write a link in HTML. The A says the thing that follows is a link. Href says what I'm giving you after the equals and inside the quotes is a URL. So you'd get an http://dtc-wsuv.org. And then if you close the quotes, that's the URL, Uniform Resource Locator. So in the link language, you say A to open the link. You give the URL. If you do an rel equals no follow in the opening of the link, what you're saying is, I want to provide a link from my page to this page, but I don't want my Google juice to follow that link, right? So if I'm writing a link to the coffee guy who gave me a cup full of spiders instead of a latte, in what may be the worst metaphor I've ever used as an instructor, but possibly you'll remember the lesson or the point about it now. If I want to link to something without improving its search results, I say rel equals no follow. If you have a comments section on something, and you know, the universal advice that's almost always true, don't read the comments, follows. But if almost all comment sections have rel equals no follow built into them, you will still see a lot of spammers put comments in there that say, hey, I thought that post was really insightful and interesting, and it's given me some tips that I can follow in my daily life. I do something similar. Won't you check out my site, www.knockoffprodabags.com? You've seen things like that? What they're trying to do is generate external links to their site so they will rank higher in Google's algorithm. Now, the one-upping between the spammers and Google's ability to detect spam is ongoing. It's an arms race up and down what's going on. There's always someone who's figured out something new, but one thing that I can say with confidence is the take-home lesson for you all is not that we have a moral obligation to do things the way Google wants. And in fact, I will use my pulpit as an instructor to say, you do not have a moral obligation to do things in the way Google wants. If it's good for you and your clients to do things the way Google wants, you should do that because it's good for you and your clients. But there's no intrinsic good to helping Google remain profitable. You're not unpaid intern volunteers for Google. However, Google has made it so that to make money from spam, from link spam, from scamming, from trying to cheat SEO is at least as much work as trying to make money through more socially accepted channels. So the big moral take home, I can take this about link spam and black hat SEO and trying to do things that way is it's not going to save you any time, and it will probably annoy your customers, which is counterproductive. That is why I, as an instructor, and I, as a web user, don't like to do those sorts of things. not because it makes more work for Google. Does that make sense? That doesn't have to be your reasoning. That's not a moral law of the universe. That's my insight on how I see things. Are you getting that? And now's a good time for green yeses or thumbs ups. And you're certainly welcome to ask questions or disagree or dispute publicly or not so. But that's the insight that I can share with you. Another thing to be aware of is as much information as, well, I'll do each of these individually since I can't seem to highlight them all. And for reference, the reason I can't highlight them all is because PDF does odd things to text. In Word, this would be a line. In PDF, this is 5 individual word boxes. There's background detail. But as many things as the search engine can figure out about you, your location, which it can get roughly through your IP or more accurately through your phone and its GPS and its cell phone signal, depending on how it's doing. There are lots of ways to pull location. Your search history, if you have a history of, think of an example that works. Aha. If you have a search history that's full of spelling color, C-O-L-O-U-R, and labor, L-A-B-O-U-R, and searching for things about London and Edinburgh and such things, if you search for football, you'll be given the Premier League. If you have a search history that's full of spelling color, C-O-L-O-R, and labor, L-A-B-O-R, and a location history of Chicago and Los Angeles, and a search history full of United States electoral politics or presidential electoral politics, you'll probably get the NFL or the NCAA when you search for football. Your search results are based on things it knows about you. If you are searching from a phone, it's going to focus on local search results or things very physically close to you. If you're searching from a laptop or a bigger screen, it's going to focus on things at a wider scope because it's not making the assumption that you're going to navigate. There's lots of assumptions that the SERP, the ranking on the SERP are made, and a lot of it is this sort of guessing. I guess because you're on your phone that you're more interested in local things instead of, I guess because you're on your phone that you're more interested in local things, but really what happened is I couldn't stop following the conversation so I left my computer downstairs and took my phone into the small room where the door closes and I wash my hands all the time. That was also a joke. You can laugh.
Nice.
Okay. I'm going to skip this bit on library discovery tools. If you're curious, things that used to be all database-like have very quickly in the past few years become more search engine-like. There was a big push for a long time to make everything easy to use like Google. As someone who deals with these things professionally, my opinion is, you know, that Seth Rogen, I've made a terrible mistake. That's the meme I use for that. It's not always a good idea. And the reason for that is not all of us have a global network of tightly linked server farms and more processing power than the government to do these calculations. If you're a small scale thing with only a few thousand users, your algorithmic results like Google are going to be, and this is the technical term, crap. So sometimes it's better to be a database, but there's been a big push for us to do more things that are like Google. And there's some benefits from that. But one of the things is our Boolean searching, our combination of sets has become much less accurate because the boundaries of what goes into a category have been much less clear. things that you can look at, and these should be linked here. If you Reddit, and I Reddit, there's a lot of fantastic stuff on Reddit. There's also a lot of terrible things on Reddit for whatever your definition of terrible is. It's equal opportunity terrible in a lot of different ways. But however you define terrible things that no one should see, it's probably on Reddit. But there are also useful things where communities come together, and Reddit's SEO subreddit is fairly good for education. Or I should make a strong caveat, the Reddit has a wiki. The Reddit itself is going to be full of a lot of people asking for quick magic overnight fixes, or people talking about high-level things that aren't really going to apply at our level. But if you go to their subreddit wiki, you may notice that a lot of the things that I had you read are also from there. That was a resource I used when I thought, hey, why don't I find a way not to make the students buy a $50 textbook for SEO? So I think the material is just as good, and you know, $50. So SEO's, or Reddit's SEO subreddit, the wiki in particular, is useful. Eli Pariser, it's very old now, and I am not the biggest fan of TED Talks. They tend to oversimplify things and make things cliche. But as long as you're aware that that's what's happening and you're an introductory user, TED Talks are great for a first introduction to something. They're just really bad for giving you the idea that now that I've watched 10 minutes on YouTube, I know everything there is to know. So Eli Pariser wrote a book with the same title, basically covers how personalization of search results, how all of our Google results are constructed from different elements, so they tend to be different, how that's affecting things. Since we have a little bit of time, there's a lot more to be said about that. Actually here, I'll let you vote on this. I can finish up this with the last couple of things and open it up to questions, or I can give you an anecdote about filter bubbles and target and how we should view the personalization of data. So give me a green if you want to hear my story, a red if you want me to answer questions. Okay, I'm going to read that as consensus. And this story is from about 2011, maybe a little after that. So it's not fresh, but the principles behind it still largely work. And it's about Target. And of all the major retailers, and if I remember correctly, Target's part of the Dayton Hudson Group. In the early days, Target was one of the first to really embrace online marketing. And most people have caught up, but their priorities were there in the beginning, and they had reaped more of the benefits for that. But if you live in a certain area, you would get Target coupons in the mail. You ever gotten coupons in the mail? Maybe you consider them junk mail. I throw them out a lot, but Target would communicate through coupons in the mail. And one day, a father of a family with a teenage daughter got a bunch of coupons, and it was full of ads for diapers and strollers and cribs and such things. And the dad decided to get really angry because a lot of his daughter's friends had gotten pregnant before he thought they were ready to get pregnant. And he didn't want Target and other companies sending them advertisements glamorizing being a young mother. So he went down to the Target store. You heard this story already. Sorry to repeat it, but it's a good story. He went down to the Target store to complain and said, "Why are you sending these coupons to my kids?" And of course, the people at the Target store were, were minimum wage workers. We don't know. He came home, still grumbling about this, and the daughter and the mother had to say, "Well, Dad, there's something we have to tell you." So the question is, how does Target know someone's pregnant before the people close to that people know they're pregnant. And of course, information about whether you're pregnant or not is only the business of the person who's pregnant or not. No one else deserves to know. The way Target knew was that every time you scan your shopper card, these things are recorded. It was one of the first big data surveillance examples. I remember laughing in the 90s, you know, when I'm old, my insurance companies are going to know how much beer and cigarettes I bought. Well, I am old, and Target or the insurance companies do know that. So when you buy things, the stores can make assumptions. Well, if you're buying folic acid and unscented vitamin E lotion, the algorithms at the data center said the only people who buy lots of folic acid supplements and unscented vitamin E lotion are pregnant people. And so it generated a hit to send people who buy those things coupons for things they're going to need later. There's very interesting things about advertising and pregnant people or new families that are really important. But anyway, do you want to know how Target solved the problem that, you know, it's super creepy for a company to know personal things about you that you did not disclose? Any idea how they solved the problem? And no fair if you heard the story already. They mixed the baby food and diaper coupons with coupons for things like chainsaws and lawnmowers. They decided that in their communication back with people, they would hide the things that were targeted to keep from revealing how much creepy information they know about you. And the way that ties into what we're talking about here is that web search was one of the original big data applications. They gather by passive searching on how people use the web, which links they click on search, which links they add when they write new web pages, right? Because the web is now a two-way communication media. Web pages ideally weren't to be created by specialized professionals, but everyone would just learn HTML and communicate that way. So when we write links, we're talking to the search engines as well. Okay. So yes, the answer is more coupons. So that's how PageRank works. And there are more ways of looking at that. And those aren't going to directly apply to the assignment. So there's a good infographic that I have saved for Monday's class that we'll talk about that is basically a way to move on from, now that we've learned the basics of how SEO works, here's how it can ramp up and get more complicated. For now, the things that are important to know about are the thing that we focused on, the on-page optimization. Where do you put your keywords, and how do you write a web page, or how do you write web content that is viewed positively by the page ranking algorithms and the SERPs? The second thing is, how do you update your keywords in order to keep up with what people are searching for today? And that is more specialized and less fundamental. So I'm focusing on technical SEO and on-page SEO because I think it's most important, and it gives you ground to learn the rest of the things. But when you're asked in a job interview, like, what do you know about SEO? A good way of explaining, well, I'm not a professional, but I know a little bit, is to say that you have a good grounding in on-page SEO and technical SEO fundamentals. And that will be read as, you know how to write it into the page, and less on that you've been trained on using the keyword analysis tools. And I think that's more important. Questions? Okay. I like staying online after class to answer more questions, and I will be on Zoom for most of the rest of the day. But I have a faculty meeting that has been running for half an hour now. That after 10 o'clock, when you have had your allotted 50 minutes of learning, I'm going to run away and take care of that. But should you desire some learning outside of the officially allotted 50 minutes, I will be around and happy to engage. So if you didn't get a chance to ask your question now, we can ask it later. All right. Please stay safe. Congratulations on making it through another week of social distancing. Remember, you are not doing distance education or education from home. You are coping with a global crisis and trying to learn a little while that's going on. And I respect the efforts that you have to make to keep with the school happenings while the rest of it is happening. Thank you, and carry on.
What time will you be available later?
Let us see.
I just came across something when I was doing a search yesterday and I was curious about it, but.
Afternoon, or certainly after 1.
Okay.
But
so
before 5:30.
Just email you.
Email me. I may have the Zoom channel up, so you can look for that.
Oh, okay.
And another thing is I keep Zoom up, and you may not have noticed this, but in the Zoom desktop client, there is a chat feature. It's how I communicate with people in the L Lab. And so if you send me a direct message through that, that's probably even faster than email. I keep it up like Discord.
Okay.
Checking to make sure he has Discord turned on. Yes, I do. Okay. All right, folks, I'm turning off this meeting and going to my next one. Be well.
Thanks.
Later. Thanks for everything.